record a sample instrument from your acoustic instruments, some tricks about how to get the best quality result while importing, and also some tricks to take some of the noise out. The first thing that you can do is normalize the region gain or the file gain. And if you wanted to do any additional volume leveling, you could do that right now as well. The next thing is we want to splice these automatically if possible. And so what it is when you're recording, make sure that you stop and have a permanent stop in between each phrase you're recording or each note you're recording, because then the detection system will be able to find it more easily. And if there's a system called strip silence in Logic, and I'm sure your DAW has a similar feature. It says remove silence from audio region. So it shows us pretty clearly what it thinks is silence versus what it thinks is sound. So because I can go a little further here, I can get a little bit more of that file. So right there, we have the actual chunk of the sound and then the noise part. And it's got a pretty good capture all across the range here. And also I can see a couple of pieces that it got that were a little bit beneath the threshold. And we can go ahead and just delete that very easily. So it's got 39 regions from that recording I made. I made a guitar recording, basically just some quick stuff to use for an instrument. And we can finesse the threshold as needed and other parameters to contour how this thing is going to automatically splice all this. So once we get it where we like it, we'll click OK, and we have our automatically made loops. And we can tell pretty clearly from this screen, what's our actual sample and what's just noise. So this is noise, this is noise, this is a maybe, there's probably some artifact. And then we have noise, and we have some noise. You may see some portion you may want to omit, depending on how fast you want the attack. And because there's such latency issues with systems these days, you might want to get as close as possible. But in this little part here, there is some musical tonality you might want to keep. Otherwise, it makes the instrument seem like it's a synthetically made instrument. Capture the noise floor of our recording. So I have the recording engaged, and I'm going to turn on the mic so we can capture the full noise floor. From here, we can adjust the threshold so that it doesn't eat up too much of the actual instrument itself. So you'll find pretty often that the range is going to be somewhere between -12 and maybe up to 4 or 5 or whatever. You'll have to do this by ear depending on your recording environment. And basically you want to keep as much as the signal as possible, of course, and reduce as much of the noise as possible. One more thing you can do is actually include a shelving EQ so that you would remove some of the low end before you actually go to the denoiser, because then you can automatically have like a good portion of some issues already removed. So the next phase of this is to apply fades to all these things automatically. And to save some time, we use the fading feature in Logic. And there's probably different ways to do this within your DAW. So I have fade in curve here, and then I have a fade out here. And so automatically, whatever I have selected is getting those little fades. So there won't be any crossover issues on the signal or weird popping sounds. So we need to figure out how to name our sample recordings. And in this case, I'm going to keep it kind of simple. So what we have is the key number, and then we have the actual key, and then we have a switch that says to check for velocity, because we're going to have velocity ranges, like 2 ranges in this example. And so we would have 0 to 74, and then in the next one it would start at 75 and go to like 127 or something like that. And so, but for this particular sample, this has everything it needs for a basic import. And when we go to import the files, we would choose pitch detection from file name, and we would choose velocity detection from file name. Additionally, this illustrates how to actually label the files based on what we're doing here. And there was an additional switch on here to label a hit, but I took that off for simplicity's sake because that's one more thing that you need to add that's not really necessary in this case. And there's a guide in Melda that actually shows you how you can add additional switches for your file names. If you have the incorrect structure between this name and this name, the file will not import at all. The two additional things that will come in handy are the tuner, and if you can create or download a keyboard chart like this, this will help with file naming because you'll want to get both the tune of the file, the actual key, and then actually the key number because it's 0 to 127. And so here you can approximate that, or you can just create your own and label every single key. Thanks to Logic, it's pretty simple to export all these files along with the fades, along with whatever new names we give each sample slice. In this case, they're regions right now, but they're going to turn to individual files in the next step. So what we do is we select them all and then choose Convert to New Audio Files in Logic, and I'm sure there's a similar way to do this in your DAW. And one of the critical parts is you want to put these in the Melda folder where your samples are stored, because that's going to make them more portable, more usable, more easily accessible through the Melda system. So therefore, I found my Melda folder, which is, in my case, is on an external hard drive, and I found the folder where my samples are stored. And so then I would just simply drop them into the folder, and we're good to go. And then we can import them into the sampler in the next stage. One additional thing you can do is, if you don't have to worry about key or velocity layers, you can just name the files by number like this. So I would start with whatever number I want to start at on my keyboard and then just choose that number. And then all of these files are going to be numbered sequentially, so that when I import it, it's going to import those numbers in that sequence as long as I only have the key number used as an attribute. So I would remove all the other attributes so that it could recognize, just look at this number, and that's where you will place the file along with the root sample. The final round of this is we're importing these samples into the sampler. So we have a sampler open, and then we're going to Menu, and we're choosing Import Audio Files. We find the folder that's in the Melda Production Sample folder, and then we find our appropriately named files with this syntax. And we luckily have a proper layout of our samples, where this is the lower half of the velocity switch, and this is the higher half of the velocity switch. So we have an equal number of samples in each section because we only have 2 velocity switches here. So it worked out perfectly. Additionally, one last thing you can do is enable this compensate sample gain by velocity, or enable compensate sample gain by loudness. And you can, of course, toggle many additional features in here. One of them that may come in particularly handy is the start feature or the end feature, but really the start feature, so you can quickly get to the starting position of the sample if you have just a little bit too much. And this can actually be automated or triggered as well, so that's cool.